Thank you. Welcome to the DPSST Private Security House Bill 2183 Implementation Work Group. Today is October 16th, 2025, and it is 9:02 a.m. So we're officially calling the letting someone else in. Okay, so as you're joining us, we wanted to let you know that the meeting is recorded. It is a public meeting. I have a public meeting announcement to read. And that is, this is a public meeting subject to the public meeting law. This meeting is being digitally recorded and will be posted to the DPSST YouTube page. Discussion of issues will only be conducted by work group members and DPSST staff. Please be mindful of comments and side conversations. All right, so with the announcement of the meeting to order and the public meeting announcement, a few other announcements. All right, our other announcements include that today is the Great Oregon Shakeout Earthquake Drill. So there may be some interruption around 10:15, 10:16 for emails or any audibles or things like that. So we are not planning to stop the meeting for that. The second announcement is we do have a planned break in the meeting. So our hope is to break at 10:30 from 10:30 to 10:45. Just to have an opportunity for everyone to refresh because a 3-hour meeting is a long meeting to get through. All right. Sure. Oh, yes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Susie Herring, and I'm the program manager for the private security certification and licensing. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for participating today and the upcoming work groups that we have. And I appreciate on behalf of DPSST, the program, myself, the industry, that you've all volunteered your time. And I respect that you all are very busy and taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. But I do really appreciate that. I think we'll work together on creating some pretty good rules for House Bill 2183. Hopefully we'll have those that have their law enforcement experience that they will be able to share with us as we talk about law enforcement experience and how it relates to private security services. And we welcome those instances, examples, and experience to relate how that may affect the transition of an individual. And I appreciate those to speak up and share those experiences with us so Jennifer can document all those and we can consider those as we start creating these rules together. So again, I just really wanted to thank you all for submitting the applications to be on this work group. We have a couple more work groups coming in the future. So also keep your eyes and ears open for those because we may need you again in the future. But thank you. I just wanted to make sure that everybody heard that from me this morning. And it is nice to put some faces to the names. I've been with DPSST for 26 years and I know most all of you. So it is really nice to see your face, maybe sometimes for the first time. So thank you again. And we will go through and do some introductions of the members. And so if we can start, you want to start people online?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll start with the individuals online and we're going to ask that you state your name and what type of certifications or licenses that you might have, any past law enforcement experience, if that's applicable, or anything else that you want to share with us. Sorry, I have to keep remembering to look at the owl here so that they, instead you keep wanting to turn around and look at the screen because that's where everybody's at. So I apologize for that. Thank you.
Let's start in the alphabetical order that's on the agenda, and there's Michael Brandt.
Yeah, Michael Brandt. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Michael Brandt. I own NAS Security Services. I'm an executive manager as well as an unarmed instructor. I was in law enforcement. I carried a few different hats. Everywhere from code enforcement to reserve police officer. And so I have kind of a unique background. And that's me.
Thank you. Next online, Justin Gates.
Oh, sorry. Turn on my camera so you guys can see me here. Justin Gates, Central Station Monitoring General Manager out at the monitoring company. I have my executive manager for DPSST. Excited to be a part of this.
Thank you. Next online, Tom Hoffett.
Yeah, I'm Tom Hepp, on Seaway Security. I've been doing this for quite a few years now. We primarily just do event security, but work a lot with law enforcement. So I've got my EM, unarmed, was an instructor at one time. I think I've had just about every certification you could have.
Thank you. Eric Knopf.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Eric Knopp. I am an armed and unarmed instructor. I have my EM as well, and I've been a reserve deputy for the past 10 years.
Thank you. Michael McNary.
Hi, Michael McNerney. I'm the Director of Campus Safety and Emergency Management at the University of Portland. I have my unarmed professional and executive manager licenses and have been doing this on and off in various capacities for about 20 years.
Thank you. Chris Miller.
Hi, my name is Chris Miller. I have unarmed and armed private security instructor certifications. Part of that, I was a police officer with an advanced police certification, and I'm currently retired.
Thank you so much. Stephen Sturman. Oh. Oh, okay. I think you're still muted, Stephen. Sorry. Took me a while to find you on the screen. No, sorry, we still don't hear you. Not yet. Okay. It's not coming through. Stephen, we'll come back to you in just a minute. I'm gonna, oh, wait, no, I thought I saw you pop up. Go ahead. Oh. Sorry, Stephen, we still can't hear you. Okay, so I'll come back. Jason Wells.
Jason Wells, started off in the United States Navy, been armed, unarmed, private security. Currently work at Lynn Community College as their clery compliance officer. Been there 17 years. I'm also a DPSST instructor and just really happy to be a part of this.
Thank you. And okay. So here, I think that's everyone but Stephen online. And we'll wait until he can pop in, and Stephen, you just holler whenever you think you've got it going on. I'll let you know we're here. Here in the room, Kristen, why don't you go ahead?
My name is Krista, City of Eugene, City Hall Operations Manager, an unarmed security professional, and executive manager certification.
Yeah, thank you. Larry.
Larry, excuse me, Larry Welty. I retired from state police. I was the acting commander of the drug enforcement section. I am now the president of DPI Security. I've been working security for the past 16 years. I was an instructor and had an executive managers.
Stephen, do you want to test?
Are you guys able to hear me okay now?
Now.
Say that again.
Yes, we do have you now.
Okay. Let me try this again. So, my name is Stephen. I'm area manager for North Pacific Security in Springfield, Oregon. I have been working in private security since 1992. I currently possess a unarmed security professional, unarmed instructor, and supervisory manager, but I have worked as an armed and unarmed officer in the past. Also have a background with, believe it or not, as a firefighter EMT from back in the 90s. That's pretty much it.
Thanks so much. So you all met Susie in the welcome and introductions. My name is Jennifer Howell. I'm DPSST's Administrative Rules Coordinator. Been at DPSST for 15 years and doing the administrative rule portions for, I guess, about 8 of those, 8 or 9. So happy that you're all here and thank you so much for participating. And we also have
Michelle Morrison. I'm one of the compliance investigators. I've been with DPSST for about a little over 7 years. I've probably spoken with a lot of you on the phone. Yeah, it's nice to put a face to a name.
Thank you so much. We're gonna keep on going through. I wanted to share some work group overview, and it's going to span a couple of different things from what public meetings are to meeting etiquette to the procedures that we'll have within the work group itself, and then finishing up with what does the rulemaking process look like. So when it comes to public meetings are recorded. They're part of the rulemaking record, and all of the work group materials that we have are subject to public record law. So that said, we also produce a copy of written minutes from the meetings, but we will be posting the recordings of these meetings on our YouTube webpage so that constituents can see the process as it goes. We're also going to post the agenda meeting materials and the written minutes to the DPSST website after the meetings. When it comes to public meetings, I know it's an exciting topic and we're all excited to be a part of it, but it is important not to discuss the work group topics outside of the work group between work group members. So of course, as members of the same industry, you'll come across each other and you'll want to chat and be friendly and those types of things, but just don't discuss the work group topics outside of the work group. Because it could lead to discussions and decisions that are made outside of the public forum. And that includes email conversations. So when we send out an email notification, we're doing a blind copy so that if someone replies, it doesn't go out to everyone and then create a rolling conversation. So that's why we do it in that format. So we encourage you all to do the same and not do email conversations back and forth about the work group topics. All right. Any questions about public meetings and the public record? Okay. All right. So for meeting etiquette, we just want to make sure that everyone shares time with others so that everyone has the opportunity to have their voices heard. And then to be constructive and to be focused on the project at hand, as well as to respect each other's views. Procedures within the work group. When we are convening the work group, we're looking for at least a majority of the work group members to consider ourselves at a quorum for having a group big enough to make the consensus recommendation. For that, we are looking for consensus. So we don't have to do a formal motion, second vote, or anything like that. We'll just be having the discussions, and then we'll be looking for verbal cues and visual cues of everyone's agreement, or at least a majority agreement for the consensus that is the recommended path to take through this process when we're looking at which standards to move forward and which standards to adjust and those types of things. So the consensus would be based on the majority of the members present. A reminder that discussions and outcomes should reflect statewide impacts and not focus on individual benefits. You're all bringing your individual experiences with you to help us inform the process, but we also have to make sure that what we put out as the final product is to the benefit of the state of Oregon and compatible with what DPSST can make available to offer. Between meetings, we'll continue to communicate information about upcoming meetings through email, maybe a poll for selecting future dates, sending out the meeting notifications, and then any additional meeting materials will go out by email as well. We do have one meeting already scheduled after this one. That's for the October 29th date. So after today's meeting, Susie and I will assess where we are in the process and how much additional work is going to be happening, and looking ahead to see when we can look to schedule additional meetings as needed. So that's when we'll be reaching out to you again by email. When it comes to having discussions, I'm going to ask that people identify themselves as they're getting ready to speak. And that's not for the formality of the process, but it's in order to make sure it's easy to tell who is speaking. So if you're online, we're just these little people on a screen. And so it'll be hard to tell who is speaking. And then for those of you online, it's easier for us to cue in on which part of the screen to look at if we know, if you say your name and let us know who you are when you're getting ready to participate. There is a raise your hand feature online that'll help queue everybody up, but it's not a mandatory process. So if it's quiet and you have got the opportunity, we're all waiting for someone to speak, go ahead and speak. All right. Any questions about formalities of the meeting? Okay. Thank you. So just a little bit about the rulemaking process. So this started with a legislative action. The legislature passed House Bill 2183 and decided that House Bill 2183 directs DPSST to adopt rules setting up a process for applicants with prior law enforcement experience to be able to use that law enforcement experience toward the training requirements for obtaining a private security professional certification. And in House Bill 2183, it tells us what we need to include in those rules as a minimum. So to follow up on that rulemaking process, we wanted to bring together the work group so that we have a group of collected individuals who can help inform the decision-making process. So your collective discussions and recommendations will probably result in a draft administrative rule. And then that draft administrative rule and the recommendations and discussions will be packaged up and submitted to the Private Security and Investigator Policy Committee. And the Private Security Investigator Policy Committee is the advisory committee to the Board of Public Safety Standards and Training, who have the ultimate approval authority for the administrative rules that are adopted. There's a process between the policy committee and the board, which we call the proposed rule and public comment period. So once we've had a chance to share your recommendations and draft rule language with the Private Security Policy Committee, and they look at it and they ask their questions and they also give feedback and approval to continue moving forward, we submit the administrative rule to the Secretary of State as a proposed rule change. And that proposed rule change period initiates public comments and additional public engagement. So you're our first level of public engagement. And then the proposed rule change and the public comment period are additional level of public engagement. But it's important to note that that process still includes you as well. So there are going to be lots of discussions that we have throughout this process. And when we talked about consensus before, we talked about that being a majority of those who are present. So there are going to be situations where someone may have a different path that they thought was the better path, and can still provide additional feedback on that through the public comment process. All that to say, we collect the public comments that we receive during a proposed rule change. Those come back for additional review to DPSST staff, to the Private Security Policy Committee, and to the board before any final rulemaking action is taken. Right now, in a beautifully aligned world, we have our work group meetings now, and we work on developing those draft recommendations and the draft rules so that we can present those to the Private Security Policy Committee in February. The committee and the board meets on a quarterly basis. So it would be the February Policy Committee, and then we would move into the public comment period throughout the month of March. And then in April would be the quarterly meeting of the board. So in a beautiful world, all of that aligns. The April board and then can adopt the rules permanently sometime in May. With the public comment period, if we do receive substantive comments, and by substantive comments, that's usually about the policy itself, the procedures that are in the policy, in the administrative rule, or the fiscal impacts that it has to applicants or to employers or agencies, that may delay the process a little bit further. You have to do additional work, but it all depends. Any questions about the rulemaking process and how we get from the beginning to the end? It's pretty dry stuff. That's why they hired me to do it, because I get excited about it. Well, all of that said, we prepared for you. So we would be moving on to agenda item 3, review of the House bill. And we put all of that together in a memo with the discussion points. So just a quick review of the House bill. So they did this during the 2025 legislative session. And the effective date of the law is January 1st of 2026. So it goes into effect January 1st. So as I mentioned, our rulemaking timeline is already going to fall after that. There just isn't feasibly enough time between the end of the legislative session and the passage of the bill and the beginning of the year to get everything lined up. But we are working on it, and we'll get there as soon as it is possible. And I already in the overview talked about the direction for DPSST to adopt rules. So what we'll dive into are the parts of the rules that it requires and a little bit of the interpretation. So the amendment in House Bill 2183 is inserting language into ORS 181A.855, and that is application for certification as a private security professional. So for DPSST and for these rules and for this law, as we're looking at prior law enforcement experience, we're looking at it as how it would apply to the private security professional certifications. So you all have been brought in to represent those private security professional certifications. That includes the alarm monitor private security professional, the event and entertainment private security professional, the unarmed private security professional, and the armed private security professional. When we're going through the rulemaking process, we're looking to identify what the eligibility requirements are for the applicants. We're looking to identify which of the training courses that we currently have can be substituted with the law enforcement experience. And we're looking to identify what an applicant must demonstrate, either through training or skills or examinations. What do they need to demonstrate to show that they meet the qualifications to hold the private security certification? Did you all have any questions about House Bill 2183? Well, get ready. We're going to go ahead and launch into those discussion points. So the memo, so now it would be on to agenda item 4, review of discussion topics. And that's going to take up the majority of our time going forward. So we put together a list of discussion topics, and I'll preface that on paper, these are organized based on those rule requirements that are in House Bill 2183. But it is okay if one question leads to another question out of order, because it's important to note that a lot of these things can overlap from one time to another. So just because it is in an order doesn't necessarily mean that we absolutely have to follow it step by step by step. So if we say, okay, that's here, let's go talk about this, we can do that. I also want to note that your discussions are going to bring new information to light. And so we may be adding additional discussion topics as we go. What we're not able to cover today will automatically carry over into our next meetings. So this may be an ongoing working document that we have to carry with us from meeting to meeting, just as a roadmap. All right. So I'm going to put Marie on the spot and welcome Marie as Marie has joined us. And then let's also pause. And I had another work group participant join us. Alex. So let's do a quick introduction of Alex. And so Alex, why don't you go ahead online?
Good morning, everybody. First, I'd like to apologize for being a little bit tardy. Hit some traffic on my way into the office. My name is Alex Gallagher. I've worked for Allied Universal for the past 13 years. I'm currently the training and compliance manager at the TriMet contract in Portland. Really happy to be here and take part in this work group.
Thank you so much.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Marie Atwood. I am the Professional Standards Division Director here at DPSST, and I also apologize for my lateness. It's been a weird morning, but we're all here now, so excited to get to know everybody and start working together.
Thank you both. Okay, so we're diving right into those discussion topics. So the first thing that probably needs to be identified is, what are we going to consider as prior law enforcement experience? So I can even preface that with terminology is important. And so as we go through the process, what one person thinks of as law enforcement is different from what another person thinks of as law enforcement. I can even say that's the same thing within this building. So some people hear the term law enforcement officer and they only think police officer. Some people hear law enforcement and they hear the spectrum of police, corrections, and parole and probation. But we also have a broader concept of public safety, and that would include additional individuals who are on this list in Section A to be the regulatory specialists that work for the Oregon Liquor Cannabis Commission, telecommunicators, and emergency medical dispatchers. So those are all disciplines that DPSST provides training for and certifies in that public safety broad collective, as well as the smaller subsection of law enforcement. So we would like to identify what's considered prior law enforcement experience. You can also look at broader sections, reserve officers. So in the state of Oregon, there are no set training and certification standards for reserve officers, so they don't come to DPSST. That's all handled on a regional and local basis for the agencies that utilize reserve officers. And then there's talking about law enforcement training and certification from individuals who are coming from out of state. And then military law enforcement specialties are probably something that we'll So I want to pause and turn the meeting over to you all for some discussion on what prior law enforcement experience means to you all, as far as what individuals we would be looking at, not necessarily what they're, well, I'll stop there.
Mike Brandt.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I think reserve officers, law enforcement training, and certification from out of state, military enforcement, they're listed as additional classifications. I know as a reserve police officer that I was required to go through the exact same training as full-time officers as far as interdepartment. And so I think that they would be considered equal as far as exceptions made for the security program.
Very wealthy. The only question I have on that is the training that they receive, because every agency is going to have different training for their reserves. So
Yeah.
as long as the training is sufficient to meet the standard, then I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Mike Brandt. Again, most of your agencies now are certified agencies. The minimum requirement for that is that all of the reserve officers have to meet that minimum standard, which is the same training for full-time as it is for reserve officers. So I don't believe there's a lot of agencies in Oregon that are not certified now.
And Michael, when you say certified, are you talking about accredited as well? Accredited?
I'm sorry, you're correct. I meant accredited.
It's fine. I just wanted to make sure I have the same.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I misstated that. You're right, accredited.
Okay, it's not a misstatement. Okay, let's see. We also have Stephen online.
Yeah, one of the things that I was looking at here when it talks about law enforcement training and certification from out of state, we don't accept private security certification from out of state, as far as I understand, and I don't know that allowing that law enforcement certification from out of state to take the place of the DPSST training that we require from private security officers. And so, I mean, it's kind of the same thing, it seems to me. As far as reserve officers go, I know that DPSST does not recognize reserve police officers as being the same as a sworn licensed police officer through DPSST. I don't know about the training requirements between agencies either, so Michael probably has more information on that than I do. But as far as law enforcement from out of state, if we don't accept private security licensure from out of state, I don't know that we would want to also recognize law enforcement from out of state.
Thank you. And then we have Tom.
That's Tom Hepp. One other question I've got, are we gonna recognize like federal officers, tribal police, stuff like that, or are they gonna fall into this category, or what are we looking at on that?
That is absolutely all part of the discussion. Do you have any thoughts on whether we should or should not?
I personally, I'm not sure. I mean, some of the federal officers that I know, they've had very extensive training. A lot of the tribal police have been, again, the ones I know have been police officers somewhere else. So they, with actual cities or state or sheriff. I know a couple of them actually require that they go through the same DPSST academy training as a regular in-state police officer.
That's what I was wondering.
Yes, I can confirm that DPSST, that tribal law enforcement agencies do have their police officers attend the basic police academy and obtain police officer certification. Yeah, they do for most all of their police officers.
Does that hold true for other federal officers?
I can't speak to the federal officers, so In the sense of someone who's coming from out of state, and so the federal officer would kind of be the equivalent. They would apply and they would submit a copy of their training and their work experience to be evaluated. And then staff look at that to see if their training mirrors the same training that's provided to the police officers through the basic academy here. And if they can find those equivalencies and all of that baseline, then they're eligible for a waiver, and they waive the basic class and go on and take a focused, what we call career officer development class that works on legal and law aspects of the job. And then they go on manual with their agency. So it just depends. So when it comes to a federal officer, it just depends just as much as it does for someone coming from out of state. When they're coming from out of state to a police trying to apply for police corrections or parole probation here in Oregon. Eric, you also have your hand up.
Yeah, Eric Knopp. Thinking about this in the context of like Oregon definitions, like there's a definition for reserve officer, which includes that you are armed with a firearm and responsible for enforcing criminal laws and traffic laws. I know my interagency academy was 300 hours, and then I had to do field training as a regular deputy with my agency with a full-time guy. So I think at least in the context of Oregon reserve officers, we are sworn and we are commissioned. We have police powers and police authority as outlined in the statute. As far as people coming in from outside the state, I think if we're going to talk about prior law enforcement experience, we all should probably recognize or do recognize that if you're a commissioned officer in another state, you've already gone through a lot more than whatever basic security training we're talking about. Like the unarmed curriculum's 14 hours, the armed curriculum's 24 for unarmed. Then those are the two that I'm most familiar with. And a lot of your commissioned people go through a lot more training than that. So I think that's something to keep in mind is when it comes to, I think, armed and unarmed in particular, we're looking to see if the training that they have is more or less extensive, and then what do we need, kind of like how DPSST does, with evaluating that coming in from the outside. What do they need to know to do this effectively here in our state, understanding our law? And that's probably what I think we should focus on.
Thank you. Jason?
Yeah, I've actually, Jason Wells, given the training to several police officers, the 14-hour course, and they believe that it's just absolutely a waste of their time because most of the rules and everything that we're going over, they've already been over that and they've experienced it. A lot of them are 25-year veterans and they're like, are you serious? We have to go through all this stuff again? And it's like, I know, I'm sorry, but you know, state law is what state law is. So if we can trim that down, I mean, a lot of these people, they already have way too much experience and they don't need to rehash over all that, you know, old stuff all over again. I think you know, just a small refresher course would be just as beneficial to them as the entire 14 and or 24-hour recertification.
Thank you. Have Michael McNary.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that because of the variation that we're hearing about regarding reserve officer training, I think we should not provide a blanket validation of that training, but we should have something that captures the essence of whether or not that is consistent with requirements. I think, you know, to the point, if folks have had sufficient training, then that's great. But we shouldn't just say because somebody's got reserve slapped on their title, we assume that they've had that level of training. And then to the point of the question regarding what pieces of, how does that officer training move into the work that we do in security. I think that, there is certainly some degree of this that can feel like a waste of time, but I've also had experiences with retired law enforcement coming into this line of work and behaving as though they were still law enforcement. And so I do not believe that we should exempt beyond a refresher course.
Thank you. And some of these pauses are me still just making my notes as we go along. I know it's recorded, but the impression notes of as we go along are also so helpful as we memorialize and.
It's okay. I know you're judging me and that's fine. No, I'm kidding.
Okay. Thank you. So I also have, I have Stephen, Tom, and Eric with hands up, and I'm losing the order in which people were there.
Eric forgot to put his hand down.
So let's go with Stephen, because there's a 2 there for Stephen.
Yeah, this is Stephen. Real quick, I don't think anybody here is going to say that law enforcement training is not far more intense, more training is involved, obviously, for that job than is for private security. The point of the point I had and the point I think that Michael had is that there's a lot of things that we do in private security that are completely different than the way law enforcement handles it. For example, searches, when we do a citizen's arrest versus law enforcement making an arrest for probable cause. And in my experience, when I have worked with former police officers, it hasn't really been it hasn't really been a good experience for me, to be perfectly honest. I've had a couple of officers that have really come real close to exposing us to serious liability issues because, the whole I'm putting you in handcuffs for your safety and mine. That doesn't work for private security. I mean, we can only put somebody when we put somebody in handcuffs, we can only do that if we're making an arrest, and we can only make an arrest under certain very strict conditions. So that's my issue has never been with the degree of training that a law enforcement officer has over what a private security officer has. That's never been the issue. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Thank you. Let's see, and then the next screen was, I've lost the other screen. I just looked. Where'd he go?
I just put myself on so I could for you.
Yeah. Eric, it's down now. Yeah. So with Mike Grant, that was the one I saw. Okay.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to add to what he said. When I've worked with law enforcement, and I know coming from law enforcement into private security, it was kind of a shocker how much I was not allowed to do as private security in comparison to what I'm forbidden to do in law enforcement. So I think that definitely a minimum of the refresher course should still be given, just so that they understand what they're not allowed to do to open us up to huge liabilities.
That was Tom next.
Tom.
Yeah, this is Tom. I agree with what everybody's saying on that. I have worked with past law enforcement that I joke about it. I tell them I got to work the cop out of them to get them to be able to do the security side. We almost need to come up with some sort of, like everybody's saying, a refresher training that basically tells that this is what our job is. It's not the same as what you had before. And if we could do an online course for that, I think that would be great. Very beneficial for them.
Eric.
Yeah, and I just want to, I agree. An online course, especially for the unarmed side, could be super cool. And I want to clarify what I meant earlier. I don't think that anyone who's previously commissioned should be exempt from any type of training. I think my point as far as the reserve as a reserve here in Oregon, if you are commissioned, that means you're sworn and you have police authority. And my point is that if an agency is willing to allow you to exercise the authority of the state with their badge on, that carries some weight. Like if there's an agency out there that's willing to say, yep, you go out there and represent us as a peace officer in the state of Oregon, there might be variations in the training because it's not done all at DPSST. That's all I'm saying, is that there's like, if a law
Yeah.
enforcement agency trusts you to go out there and act on their behalf as an agent of the government, I'm not entirely sure, outside of going to the police academy for 12 weeks, they're, I don't know, maybe I'm not making sense.
No, I think you're making sense.
And Mike, did you still have your hand up or have additional comment?
Oh, forgot to put my hand down. But I will say that yeah, I absolutely agree with Eric that reserve officers still have to meet a standard in the state of Oregon. And again, like I said, most agencies in the state of Oregon are accredited, and with accreditation, there's a standard that has to be met for you to be commissioned, period. So I think that there should be some weight given to that.
Absolutely.
Larry? Oh, go ahead, Larry.
Okay, Larry Welty. And I agree with what you just said, because my experience prior to being hired by the state police, I was a reserve for a small city. And the only training I received was they gave me an ORS, said, read it. So I was pretty, it changed a lot since then, because that was a long time ago. But I would just be cautious about, blanketly giving somebody that's a reserve for an agency the same consideration that you would a certified police officer.
Well, and Mike McNerney, I think that, to my previous statement, I think in support of what Mike's saying, like if the vast majority of these agencies are accredited in the state of Oregon, then we simply say an accredited agent, if you're a reserve with an accredited agency, we provide the same consideration. And if it's not an accredited agency, then we don't know what that certification looks like. And sorry, you don't get the exemption.
Also, I know that all of my training through the Reserve Academy and after the Reserve Academy still is logged with DPSST. So even as a reserve, you could go into my DPSST number and know exactly what training I had already received.
Yeah, I was gonna jump in and share the same thing. Like, and all those records are publicly searchable, so like anybody can go and look.
Okay, Jennifer here. I'd like to kind of circle it around. So we will definitely be having discussions about what amount of training or which specific pieces of training need to be included in that prior law enforcement experience in order to be eligible. When we're talking about who can bring that experience to the table, we've clearly heard in this conversation consideration of police officers and consideration of reserve officers. So there's been some question about out of state and military. I'm going to save those for last. Let's go down this list of other public safety and law enforcement disciplines that DPSST trains and certifies to find out if any of them have direct nexus to, being able to use that training and experience towards, private security. So there are corrections officers. And I wanted to find out, when it comes, let's talk about corrections officers and parole and probation officers together. Are either of those, careers eligible for this prior law enforcement experience discussion?
Stephen's got his hand.
Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, I actually have had prior corrections officers work for me, and they do a bit better than prior law enforcement. They work in a different environment, and so what I found is they didn't feel that the training was as remedial. For them, again, it's a culture thing. So they're used to working under a different set of rules than we are, and I'm not sure that I would exempt corrections. That's just my input on it. I didn't mean to do that.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Who's next?
Michael.
Yeah, so we kind of lumped them together, but I would potentially keep them separate in my mind. Corrections officers like Stephen, I've actually had pretty positive experiences working with them in our setting. They seem to acclimate to the more restrictive guidelines more readily and have a better understanding of them. Parole and probation, I would worry about how much of that responsibility is transferable, because I don't know that they're necessarily interacting in a similar function or capacity.
I'm thinking.
Okay.
And I'm thinking that I'm like where I just tried to separate us out from, let's talk about these disciplines to talk about training that qualifies later. So I'm thinking from that applicant's perspective, they're gonna say, well, my corrections and my parole and probation training includes de-escalation, it includes ethics, it includes these types of things. So
Mike, do we have a comment?
yeah.
Mike took his hand down. It's back to Stephen.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing about the de-escalation, yeah, they include de-escalation in their training. There's a lot that's in our training that isn't included though, and I mean, excuse me, patrols procedures. The again, it goes back into their environment about working as far as search. You know, they don't have to worry about consent for search. The same thing goes for recording conversations, for example. Then, of course, there's the whole, basically the latter half of the book about current events and trends that I'm not sure that they're their training is also in. So, I mean, I'm just not sure that it would translate necessarily all that well for private security from corrections.
Mike Brandt.
Yeah, I actually have a really good friend that's a corporal down at Salem for corrections, and he's a corrections instructor as well. And talking to him, I think that, like Stephen and Michael were saying, that the de-escalation part and that works in real great for security. But my concern would be as well that they've had interaction with the public on general terms. I would think that they probably would need to go through the entire class, especially firearms.
Tom?
Yeah, I've hired past corrections and parole and probation, and all of them actually liked taking the class. They said they actually learned a lot in there that they didn't know. So I kind of agree with everybody. I think that they should not be exempt from having to take it all, armed or unarmed.
Krista Herder, I do, for me, one of the most important pieces kind of, I think that there should, and we're going to talk about what level of training equals what, or experience equals what, but I think some of the most important pieces are the emphasis on the scope. It could be an extreme scope change between law enforcement or parole and probation or corrections and security professional. And the laws as they apply to those roles. So our, with the city of Eugene at City Hall or the officers that we work together with DPI with, they do very different things than our metal detector monitors, who I directly manage. And all the same, we really have to care about, are they following the laws for our liability and theirs, and for the standard operating procedures development, et cetera.
Thank you. Anyone else online? Go ahead, Jason.
Now, the largest nexus that I've discovered is a police officer, when they become a certified security officer, is understanding they no longer have police powers. They are a citizen arresting somebody, and they have to actually witness the incident happen before they can act on it. And so that training is definitely invaluable, that they understand, guess what, you're no longer a sworn police officer, you are a citizen and acting as citizen's arrest. And they definitely need to remember those, or they can have a giant problem on their hands. Thank you.
Michael?
And my apologies, I'm about to invoke some meta-analysis here, but I suppose as we talk about this, it's important to think about in what ways does DPSST recognize these cross certifications in other areas. So, you know, we're talking about a bunch of roles that are all certified through DPSST. If that is transferable in other categories, it seems like it would be imprudent for us to start cutting it finer, especially because I feel like a lot of the things that folks are talking about being really valuable for these other roles are actually kind of the same things that we were talking about being really valuable for the police officers as well. So if we're doing an exempted training that's still touching on those critical issues, is it really still covering those same bases we have the same concerns about with corrections and parole and probation officers, dispatchers? Like, are we still hitting those same points? And so maybe they should be exempt because we recognize that through DPSST in other areas. And I don't know the answer to that.
Sure. Michael, great question. I'm going to try to answer based on what I understood your question to be, and it's Jennifer. So basically you're saying, if you've got police certification, can you get correction certification? Can you get parole and probation certification? Which ways do those flow? And so I can answer that. If you have your police training and certification, you can take abbreviated training to get corrections. But a corrections officer still has to take parole and probation officer training if they're doing that. Same thing for parole and probation to take corrections. And if you're going in the police direction from corrections or parole and probation, you have to take the full police class as well. So the only time you get an opportunity for abbreviated training is when you're transitioning from police to corrections. So great.
Else.
Chris?
Chris Miller. my question, I guess,
Oh,
reserves in there, would there be a process where, similar to submitting a curriculum vitae?
Chris,
the
I'm
academy.
sorry. Chris, I'm sorry, you froze, and so the audio was really broken up. I'm wondering if you go off camera, but ask your question, if it'll come through.
I'll give it a shot.
Back. Feel free to be on camera as much as you want to, but I don't know if that'll make it easier. Or you could just give it a try. So go again.
I'll give it a shot. I was just questioning if people could submit a curriculum vitae for DPSST review.
That can definitely be part of consideration for the process for applying, is that you submit what training and experience you have to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Is that kind of what to your question?
Yeah. That way you could look at it and see if it's similar enough to accept or not.
That can definitely be a consideration. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, Larry Welty. I haven't seen the test for a long time. So I'm sure it covers a lot of the topics that we're talking about. Observe and report, have to actually observe the crime being committed and so on and so forth. I know that there was some information in the packet regarding challenging the course, basically taking the test and passing the test. So I wonder if that would be considered as sufficient.
And that is part of our discussion, of course, and then, to be able to recognize other than police officers and reserve officers. So if we're looking at other disciplines and they can successfully complete.
No, I'm basically talking just about the police officer or the reserve officer.
Okay. So whenever I go to the first question that we were talking about, as far as like who can apply, where the experience is coming from, I'm basically hearing a consensus that police and reserve officer training, once we can identify what those levels of training or certification need to be, definitely fall under potential for prior law enforcement experience. So far in this discussion, I'm hearing that corrections and parole and probation wouldn't necessarily fall under this prior law enforcement experience. Just want to make sure I'm reading that correctly, and if there's any other thoughts or processes to that.
Mike McNerney, I don't fully agree with that. I guess I was a little vague, but I would like those roles, particularly field work, quote unquote, field work roles. So when we start talking about telecommunicators, dispatchers, that sort of thing, to alarm monitor, but in terms of unarmed and armed professional licensure, if you're doing field work, I kind of feel like there should at least be an avenue to challenge and take the test and pass it. But at the same time, I think that your point is well taken, that it doesn't necessarily match the flow in DPSST. So, and also, like Tom shared and some other folks were saying, like these are not the folks that are saying, how dare you make me sit through this whole class? And so we probably can still require it of them without too much kerfuffle. But at the same time, I think that their experience is in many ways equally applicable.
Krista, real quick, I completely agree with that, although I don't particularly have any feelings about kerfuffles because the knowledge is important and it needs to be, there is a level of freshness that needs to exist.
Eric Knopp, I would agree with that. I think that a huge component of both the armed and the unarmed curriculum is use of force law and civil liability. And as a guy who's currently a reserve, I can tell you that a lot of my law enforcement training is civil law and use of force law being crammed down my throat at every training session. And I think that's what um, gets kind of the frustration and the eye roll is I've had this at every training. I went through it at DPSST, and now I want to go be a security officer, and I have to sit here for 38 hours while you tell me all about use of force law and civil liability. And I think that's probably where most of the frustration comes from, is it's been an entire career of that. And so I think finding a way to navigate around that. I have not personally trained anybody in security who's from parole and probation or corrections, so I'm trying to take a step back from that. But knowing what I know about that process, it's similar on those two topics, right? The work itself is very different, and I agree with what Mike said about that. The work environment is very different from being out in the field. But then again, like at my HC, like if I understand correctly, most corrections officers are sworn and they carry a gun, and parole and probation are sworn and they carry a gun. And I wonder if that's where that delineation should be, is whether if you're sworn and you're authorized by an agency to carry a gun. I'm thinking of like LEOSA, which allows law enforcement officers to carry nationwide. If we want to look at something similar to that, where it says if you are sworn and you're authorized to enforce the law, then you meet this set of exemptions, and if not, then you have to go a different avenue.
Well, the only problem with that is with corrections officers in particular, like I said, it's a completely different environment and a completely different set of rules that they have to follow versus to what we have to follow. And it's not, like I said, it doesn't really translate that well from the experience I've had with having trained former corrections officers, and they value the class that we do, the 14-hour unarmed class. But
Sure,
you know,
and I'm happy to defer to your experience because, like I said, I haven't trained anybody from corrections.
I haven't done anything for parole or probation either, so I can't talk about them. But I mean, I got a friend who is in is a probation officer, and I might pick her brain a little bit. But yeah, as far as that discipline goes, I don't know enough about it.
Mike Brandt?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Eric. Well, actually, I kind of agree with the different people. I think that it all has to do with your field of work. I think police officers are out in the public all the time, and so it's just a matter of adjusting their rule change on what they can and can't do. Corrections, parole, probation officers, you're talking in a way a complete different field, a complete different set of rules. And so I don't know that applies as much. Um, I like the idea of law enforcement being able to just challenge the exam and not have to do the class. If they can challenge the exam and pass the exam, then I think they're good to go.
I have trained and, like I said, worked with corrections and parole and probation, and like Eric said, they get that crammed down their throat the same as what the police officers are doing, the civil liability and everything else. They have to know the laws just like anybody else. I also agree with Michael. I think that they should be exempt from having to take the full course, but there should be some sort of training requirement, whether it be 2 hours or 4 hours, and just cut out the law side of it. They all know what the laws are.
And I feel like as an instructor, I think this is going to fall more on the instructor of understanding what knowledge gaps their students have. And like for me, I'm heavy on the legal side because I don't want to see any of my officers or any of my students that are trained wind up in prison, right? And so, and especially when I've had former law enforcement in my classes, I'm like, listen, you gotta throw, somebody else said it, like you gotta untrain the cop brain and kind of throw this out. You no longer have reasonable suspicion, you're not detaining people, it's arrest only. But I feel like that's more of an emphasis on how the instructor presents the curriculum. I feel like if for all of the prior law enforcement officers that I have trained, I could have put them through just the 4-hour unarmed refresher and the 4-hour armed. And as long as I emphasized that scope shrinkage, like somebody else mentioned, I think they could have done fine. And then obviously they need to demonstrate being able to shoot straight. I think that's a given. Because that's important. I think that this is more of an emphasis on the instructor and how they present that curriculum to make sure that the prior Leos, whatever their background is, knows what that scope is and where their authority starts and ends.
Agree.
Mike
Thank you.
McNerney, I think that the rules, the remediation rules kind of cover this in a way. So if we offer an abbreviated course and we offer it to scopes that maybe we're a little on the fence about whether or not it's fully transferable, if they take the 4-hour and fail the test, then they have to remediate, and based on how much they fail by, that channels them into the appropriate level of course. And so I think maybe we err on the side of being very broad in terms of this experience that's eligible for this exemption, knowing that anyone who fails to meet the standard will then kind of fall back into the appropriate level of training, assuming that the instructors are following the remediation rules.
I completely agree.
This is Tom again. The other thing we need to take in consideration, I don't know about what other states require for corrections and parole and probation training.
Yep.
The people I've dealt with have just been strictly in Oregon. So do they got, again, I think that they have to prove some sort that they've had the training requirements to meet whatever we're looking for here.
Thank you.
Larry.
And I would agree with Eric on the firearms training. I would never drop that training from an armed position.
No.
Yeah, I mean, if we're requiring folks to recert annually on shooting, I don't know that there's any value in even considering some form of exemption
No.
from the shooting requirement. And besides, if you're carrying, who doesn't want to go show that they know their stuff at the range?
But my question would be, do they need to go through the full 24-hour, or could they do the 4-hour refresher and then shoot?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very comfortable with the refresher and then letting the remediation catch anybody who falls outside, the variance of approved training. The more I think about it, the more I think that's a pretty reasonable way to tackle it.
And we will
Which,
we will explore all of that deeply in the next discussion points and meetings.
sorry, which takes me back to the real question we're trying to answer, which is, I think anybody who's doing enforcement facing work, that's transferable to unarmed and armed to varying degrees, but can be captured. And then for alarm monitoring, I think previous dispatch certification should be considered. And again, if they are unable to pass the refresher course, then same remediation opportunity is presented there. So hopefully that addresses specifically like which of these categories should we incorporate as well.
Any other comments or feedback on telecommunicators and emergency medical dispatchers?
I know nothing
understand.
about.
I understand for me, I don't think we, to be perfectly honest, I don't think we train enough for private security. Um, I mean, when this program first started back in '96, it was 32 hours classroom and 8 hours on the job training that was required to be licensed as an unarmed private security officer. And when we're talking about going from telecommunications into unarmed private security officer or armed private security officer, there's not enough training there. There just isn't. The communications is what they're trained to do, and we're trained. Communication is a small fraction of what's in our curriculum. And when I'm talking about when I talk about not having enough training in an area, it's because I'm from an area. I'm coming from a standpoint where we already don't train enough. We train for 14 hours, and we need to be training more than that.
And in consideration of alarm monitor and event and entertainment certifications with telecommunicators and emergency medical dispatchers.
Again, different disciplines.
I was gonna ask Justin if you had any comments on that.
Not so much. No, I would agree. They're a different, kind of a different branch than all this other stuff that we're speaking of. So no, not necessarily. I like more training, obviously, than less. Where my mind goes with some of this stuff, and again, I am not adversed in the security side, private security, individuals carrying weapons, that kind of stuff. But my mind always goes to, why did this come about and what's going on? Being in business and whatnot, my thought is there must be a need somewhere, right? So are we short private security individuals, and that's why we're trying to accommodate it? Or, my mind is going, why are we accommodating in a sense? So that's kind of where my mind is going with all this, because again, I don't have the experience that all these other gentlemen have had. But yeah, my mind goes, why?
Can I ask you a follow-up question? Have you hired retired telecommunicators or emergency management dispatchers?
We've hired, obviously, central station monitoring, right? So we're doing dispatching and that kind of stuff. I have not come across anyone that had prior experience. We're usually just training from the ground up. So we have our trainer on site and go through the training processes to get them certified through DPSST. But I haven't really come across that yet. It's probably because we're in a rural area, right? We're located in Estacada, Oregon. So it's a rural area. It seems like the majority of ours would be, younger individuals that are going to college, and then we kind of have that slow churn of operators. We have some that have been around for quite a bit, but nothing that I have yet to see an operator that has past experience.
Thank you. And then Michael, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, so we employ our own dispatch and alarm monitoring team on the campus, and we do fairly regularly see folks coming in with prior dispatching experience. We've started to kind of err on the side of just having them certified as private security professionals in lieu of doing the alarm monitoring, just because of the difficulty in getting a trainer to provide that training to the team. But that being said, I think, at least from my experience, the skills are highly transferable for 911 and emergency medical dispatching. Like it's again very much the same. Like, we're going to tell them, hey, by the way, it's going to be way less intense. Like, we're not going to be hammering you the same way BOEC does in Portland. But generally speaking, their skill set is transferable. Their understanding of the expectations and requirements within the field are pretty transferable. The one piece that alarm monitoring includes that they tend to need is the sort of technical aspects, talking about alarm systems, card access, video surveillance, those sorts of things, and how to interface with those. But because every operation is likely to have their own sort of specialized training around those systems. I don't, for us, we were sort of like, we're just going to put them through unarmed private and then train them on our systems. But yes, but I would say I agree with Stephen. I'm not suggesting that, hey, 911 dispatch, here's a gun, go patrol this property. Like, I don't think those two should be interchangeable just for alarm monitoring.
Okay, thank you. Mike Brandt?
Yeah, I don't want to sidetrack too much on this issue, but I agree with what's being said about additional training. I know in my 14-hour class, when I teach it, we also cover proper approaches of vehicles, stuff of that, safe ways to handcuff, different topics like that, that I believe security interacts with individuals that way a lot. And so I think there should be a little bit more in safety type training for their personal protection than we have in that 14-hour class.
Oh yeah.
Jason Wells?
Yeah, I'm kind of on board with everybody else too, but when you're doing 911 dispatch or anything like that, you have to have emotional intelligence training and everything else to be able to talk people down. And how is their experience any different than a person coming off the street and saying, I want to be a security officer? And we feel that they're competent after 14 hours of training. But on the other hand, we're trying to say, well, these folks may not be competent with 14 hours. They need more. So either we need more for everybody or, the same. We can't, play favorites on one side or the other. We have to just bring in everybody on their competency level and see what they're capable of, and then test them on their abilities or their deficiencies. Thanks.
Stephen?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I want to clarify something. When it comes to 911 emergency dispatchers going laterally into alarm monitoring, I don't know enough about the two disciplines, but I would think that they would work well going from one into another. But from going from a 911 call taker dispatcher to private security officer, again, I would say that they would need to go through the full unarmed course or armed course, whichever discipline they're going to. As far as the training aspect goes, taking just a regular Joe off the street and giving him 14 hours to talk with what you were saying, Jason, I don't believe that's enough. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. It's not enough for somebody who's 911 call taker going in after 14 hours. It's not enough for Joe off the street going in 14 hours. I think we need more. This is something I've been advocating for years. And so that's where I'm coming from. I want to make sure that I'm clear on that. I think that it's across the board. We need more training.
Okay. We're at 10:25. Oh, go ahead, Mike Brandt.
Just to clarify what I was saying, when I speak of more training, I mean more practical training. I mean more them getting out of their chair, them looking at proper handcuffing techniques, them looking at proper ways to approach a vehicle, both from the front and from the rear, things of that nature that they're going to encounter out there doing private security. Having sample conversations with people and having to try to de-escalate the situation, with role players, things of that nature. That's what I'm talking about when I say extra training, not necessarily sitting in a classroom. I think it's stuff they need to do hands-on, maybe some light defensive tactics, things like that they should have before they go out into the public. I think it gives them a better, or I know it has my people, it has given them a better sense of being equipped to do the job and being confident in doing the job, which translates in them being able to de-escalate and that much better because they're more comfortable.
Tom?
I'm not trying to disagree with everybody on this stuff, but some of that more training needs to come within the companies. I mean, we work events. I don't need to know how to approach a car because We don't deal with cars. So I understand what everybody's saying with the training, more of it, but I train my staff for what we do. So we need to look at what this entails as far as just the basic course on this. What's enough to get through it? I tell all my staff when I hire them, when you take this unarmed class, it's not going to teach you how to do security. Basically, it teaches you how not to get sued if you follow the rules. I'll teach you how to do the security as we go.
Yeah, and you also can't like ignore the fiscal impact of mandating more training to companies that are strictly hands off, that have post orders that say don't approach cars, that have post orders that say don't go hands on with people. The fiscal impact of forcing companies to pay employees for more training that they are never going to use is something that we need to consider as well. But as an instructor, I also agree anybody out in the field should have more training. And I'm kind of backwards. I started as a reserve. I was a reserve for several years before I went into the private security side. And seeing the lack of training in the industry really shocked me. So I appreciate that. And as an instructor, I agree everybody should have more training, but I also agree that it's on the companies to make sure that your people are equipped for the job that you are asking them to do. And I don't know that the state should come in and mandate how that's done, within reason. Obviously, we need to have a basic standard.
All right, one last comment before we go to break. And Michael, you had your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to circle back with, I think we've kind of rabbit holed a little bit on the training issue, and I think it would be good to circle back to, I don't hear a lot of distinct concern with the categories of certifications that we feel are somewhat, should at least be permitted to attempt the shorter period of training. I think that if you're DPSST certified for quote unquote field work, and you're going to be allowed to take a shorter or abbreviated course, those kind of all align with most folks, at least as long as there's that fail safe of if you can't pass the review class, you get kicked back. And then the same thing for alarm monitoring. I think the events certification is so is more abbreviated as I understand it. I haven't actually been through it myself, and so I don't know that there's any value in cutting that class down, because it's also very esoteric to specifically events work. And so I feel like it's good information for anybody because it's very different.
Thank you. Okay, so we will go ahead and have our scheduled break from 10:30 to 10:45. And when we come back, we'll do a quick recap and see where we can move forward. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to pause the recording part here, I think.
I think you have to stop and restart.
Okay.
So there'll be 2 sections.
Okay. All right.
And there was